this afternoon, I beg to move that this House has considered food poverty in Merseyside. Can I start today by thanking all of the selfless and dedicated food bank volunteers, not just in Merseyside, but across the country. Over the past 2 years, I've been volunteering at a local food bank in my constituency, the North Liverpool Food Bank Network at St John's Church in Twigg, and I've seen firsthand both the fantastic work that they do and the massive need that they're seeking to address. Can I also welcome my honourable friends from across Merseyside who've joined us for this debate. Two of my honourable friends who are unable to be here today have sent their best wishes. My neighbour, the honourable member for Wavertree, has been a long-standing campaigner on this issue, and my other neighbour, the honourable member for Walton, of course used his first Prime Minister's question last year to ask about schools providing free meals during the holidays, a subject to which I'll return later in my speech. Both have other duties in the House this afternoon. So, David, this is a debate, frankly, that we should not be having. For a first world country, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, it is surely shameful that we see the exponential increase in food bank use that there has been. According to the highly respected Trussell Trust, in 2011, 128,697 people were provided with a 3-day emergency food package. The comparable figure last year was over 1.1 million. That is an 8-fold increase in a 6-year period. In the run-up to Christmas, ITV's Granada ran a special report on food poverty, and they focused on Morecambe in the northwest. And that programme was seen by over 7 million people. And the issues that it raised so powerfully are exactly the same issues that we face in Merseyside. The Department of Health defines food poverty as the inability to afford or have access to food to make up a healthy diet. The United Nations found that between 2014 and 16, just over 4% of the UK population were deemed to be severely food insecure. That is nearly 3 million people in our country, and that suggests that actually there are about 2 million people suffering from food poverty who, for whatever reason, haven't had access to a food bank. Across the northwest last year, the Trussell Trust network provided 175,000 emergency food packages. That is the largest number in any region in the country. And this, of course, doesn't take into account the independent food banks who are also providing food aid, including the Hope Food Banks, the Orchard, and the Merseyside Youth Association Food Bank. Last Friday, for example, the Orchard Food Bank in my good friend, the Honourable Member for Garston and Hell Woods constituency, opened at 10 in the morning. They handed out 49 bags of food in the space of 25 minutes and had to close at 11 because they'd run out of food packages. Such was the demand. Across Merseyside, the two biggest factors driving people to use food banks are low income and changes and delays in the benefits system. In the 6 months between April and September of last year, 27% of people in Liverpool said the main reason they were being referred to the food bank was due to a low income. These are people in work, having to use food banks. And of course, in recent years, we've seen an increase in food prices. Last year, for example, was the highest rate of food price inflation for 4 years. If you combine that with wage stagnation, increasing job insecurity, many of the most vulnerable families in work are taking home less money. Real wages have barely increased in this country for over a decade, and last year, in fact, they fell by 0.4%. This brings together what you might describe as a perfect storm, where the price of food is increasing much more quickly than most people's wages. I urge the government to focus more on measures to tackle the scourge of low pay in this country. Nationally, these are the main reasons for people being referred to food banks: low income for families in work, In Liverpool, although that's a significant number, the primary reason is changes and delays in the benefit system. 51% of those who used a food bank in Liverpool last year did so because of changes or delays with their benefits. And since 2010, we've seen over 20 major changes to working age benefits in this country. And this has affected more than 50,000 households just in the city of Liverpool. Liverpool City Council undertook a cumulative impact assessment of these changes 2 years ago. And I'd like to urge the Minister to work with Liverpool City Council and other local authorities to undertake a current cumulative impact assessment of the impact of benefit changes in communities, not only in Merseyside, but in other parts of the country, of course.
Thank you, Sir David, and I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Just before Christmas, I walked into my constituency office and I saw Jay Glover, my assistant, on the phone for an extraordinary amount of time to DWP, trying to resolve somebody's benefits problem just before Christmas. That person had to go to the food bank. Would he agree with me that that incidence is becoming ever more frequent in all of our constituency offices, so we know that this DWP delay is real?
I thank my honourable friend, and she is absolutely right, and certainly my experience, and I'm sure it's the same for colleagues at my advice surgeries and my constituency caseworkers working in my local office, is exactly the same as hers. And this survey evidence that I was referring to demonstrates in Liverpool, half of those who are having to use food banks are saying it's because of delays and changes with benefits. So give way.
Giving way, and congratulate him also for raising this really important subject. In Wallasey, we have a very similar result. Well over half of the people that have to use the food bank, and it's large numbers now, report to the Trussell Trust that they're doing so because of either benefit sanctions, delays to their benefits. And so this is a government-made problem. Will you agree with me?
My honourable friend makes a very powerful point, and I'm going to focus now in my remarks on that set of challenges that arise from that combination that she described so accurately of the impact of benefit changes, benefit cuts, benefit delays, but also of sanctions. A report by Sheffield Hallam University pointed out how the risks and costs had in many ways been passed from central government to local authorities, and from the point of view of Merseyside authorities, this has coincided with a drastic and dramatic cut in central government funding for those local authorities. Of course, universal credit has itself, as it's been implemented, had an impact on debt and therefore on food poverty. And in an article published this weekend, my honourable friend, the member for Stretford and Urmston, made a number of suggestions to the government for changes that they could make to universal credit in a way that I think would have a real impact on communities such as those across Merseyside. Two of her suggestions that I think are relevant for today's debate. One is to urge the government to follow Labour's example and commit to passporting every family on universal credit to free school meals in order to avoid the cliff edges when household earnings increase. And secondly, she suggested that claimants should be able to choose to receive their universal credit payments fortnightly in order to minimise the risk of households running up debts while they wait for payments. And I would urge the Minister to consider those two very positive suggestions from my honourable friend. In a letter from the former Minister at Work and Pensions to Liverpool City Council, the then Minister wrote, "The suggestion that benefit delays are responsible for an increase in food bank usage is unfounded." I have to say, Sir David, that this is completely at odds with what I hear when I volunteer at my local food bank, and it's completely at odds with all of the information I've had from a range of local organisations in preparing for today's debate. Can I ask the new Minister, who I welcome to his position, to take a different view to that which was taken by his predecessor, to instead support the view of the Trussell Trust that changes to benefits are forcing people to turn to food banks? And if he isn't prepared to take that position, I'd like him to explain to the House what his alternative explanation is for the 8-fold increase in the numbers of people using food banks. Food poverty is a growing public health concern. A lack of access to nutritious food needed for a balanced diet increases the burden on the NHS. Liverpool has seen a significant rise in the number of fast food outlets coincide with a rise in food poverty. The City of Liverpool has the 34th highest outlet density out of 325 local authorities, and the areas with the highest density tend to be in the most deprived parts of the city. One of the strongest measures of a healthy diet is how often people manage to eat 5 portions of fruit and veg a day. And Liverpool has the 29th lowest proportion of the population managing that. Manchester is the only core city whose proportion is lower still. Liverpool City Council has tried to address this challenge, teaming up with a brilliant local social enterprise, Can Cook. Can Cook have produced food packages using donations containing predominantly fresh food and feeding local people with nutritious food for 5 days. Can I take this opportunity to praise the work of Can Cook in their efforts to try to make healthy food parcels available for people, and to thank the Liverpool Echo, who teamed up with Can Cook for a significant fundraising campaign in 2016. This is just one example of the ways in which people across Liverpool, including the Liverpool City Council, are striving to help the poorest in our city. The Liverpool Citizens Support Scheme was set up by the City Council to help the most vulnerable in Liverpool facing short-term crisis to meet their needs for food and other essential items. The average award is £91, and Liverpool City Council made over 10,000 of these awards, of which 8,000 were for families in urgent need. The Council is also helping with discretionary housing payments for people who need extra help with their rent, and the original budget for this scheme was £2.7 million, but the sheer demand has meant that the Council has found another £600,000 for it. I think this highlights a number of things, including the impact of the bedroom tax on communities across Liverpool. And the Mayor of Liverpool, Joe Anderson, has established the Mayoral Hardship Fund, a special £2 million fund over 3 years, set up specifically for the Council to be able to respond to the exceptional and growing pressures on Liverpool residents who are on a low income. These schemes have become a life support system for some of the most vulnerable families in the city, facing years of austerity, wage stagnation and benefit changes. Can I ask the Minister to join me in praising the City Council for doing this, to tell us what the government will do to support Liverpool's efforts to protect the most vulnerable, and will they encourage other local authorities in other parts of the country to establish similar such schemes? I want to finish, Sir David, by talking about one of the many brilliant community organisations in my constituency that work with some of the most vulnerable and poor. That organisation is called Croxteth Gems. And before Christmas, I was pleased to team up with Croxteth Gems to help with the campaign they ran, 12 Days of Christmas. Jean Hannah, who runs the organisation, tells the story of a family that she visited in Croxteth a couple of years ago who were on hard times. And Jean arrived at their home and was shocked to see that rather than an actual Christmas tree, the family simply had a picture of a Christmas tree because they couldn't afford a tree or Christmas decorations. And the 12 Days of Christmas campaign sought to ensure that some of the poorest families in Croxteth were able, nevertheless, to enjoy their Christmas. Originally, the aim was to help 100 families, but the strength of the local community response was such that Jean and her team were able to deliver food, clothes, Christmas trees, decorations and presents to 136 families, benefiting over 350 children. Now, Croxteth Gems does work like this all the year round. They were actually originally set up to provide play and youth services, but because of the reality of food poverty, increasingly they've had to serve food to hungry children. One of the things that they do is during school holidays, they provide play to children in the local area, and as part of that, they provide meals. They're now helping to support a local school to provide a breakfast club for over 70 children throughout the school year. And this additional work that they do beyond their core mission has only really been made possible through generous donations from the local community. Now, I know that my right honourable friend, the member for Birkenhead, has led some excellent cross-party work on urging that there should be free school meals for children during the school holidays. And I think this is a measure that would make a real difference to some of the poorest and most vulnerable families in Merseyside and indeed in other parts of the country. I know there is a private member's bill on this subject on the order paper on Friday. I urge the Minister and the Government to give serious consideration to supporting this proposal to help some of the poorest and most vulnerable children be fed throughout the school holidays. There are organisations up and down the country like the ones that I've referred to, like Croxteth Gems, like the North Liverpool Food Bank, stepping in where the state has failed. Can I also, in particular, thank Fans Supporting Food Banks, which has brought together Everton Supporters Club and the Spirit of Shankly, Liverpool supporters, to mobilise football fans in Liverpool in support of our local food banks. I want to see an end to food poverty, not just in Merseyside, but across the whole of the United Kingdom. And if that is going to happen, Sir David, it will require a fundamental change in government policy on benefits, on wages, and on the funding of local authorities. I am pleased to have had the opportunity today to highlight the scale of the challenge that we face and also to pay tribute to the amazing response of local communities across Liverpool. Local people have risen to the challenge of addressing food poverty. I urge the Minister and the Government to change course so that together we can finally defeat food poverty once and for all.